Alright class, today we are covering skin and body membranes. This is Chapter 4 in the Marine Essentials of the Human Anatomy textbook. So this focuses on mostly the integumentary system, but it has the first 4 or so pages will focus on body membranes. They're not part of any one specific system. They're actually found throughout all the systems, but they cover it here because it functions in protection and covering, much like the integumentary system. So, remember, we should read through our text. I believe this is found on pages 110 to 113 in your textbook or somewhere around there. I haven't wrote this, but it should be somewhere around there. So we're looking for Chapter 4, Skin and Body Membranes. Remember, as you read through the text, that you should look over the objectives prior to reading any section of text. And we want to be able to see were we able to answer or meet those objectives after we read the text. That kind of lets you know your level of success for reading. Reading is not just about getting from point A to point B. We need to see what information we are held responsible for when reading that. So do read over that in addition to watching this podcast here. That really makes it make a lot more sense. After reading this section and completing today's presentation, you should be able to list the general functions and locations in each of the body membrane types. And I've went ahead and listed those body membrane types for you here. They are cutaneous, mucous, serous, and synovial. And we'll talk about each one of those in more detail as we move through this presentation. Alright, you should also be able to compare the structure of each of the major membrane types. Alright, body membranes. These cover body surfaces, line body cavities, and form protective sheets around organs. And in essence, this often lubricates the organ. Alright, classification of body membranes. We can break it down into 2 major categories, epithelial and connective. So these names, especially the name epithelial, can be somewhat misleading. Remember in last chapter we learned about epithelial tissue and connective tissue. So epithelial membranes are based on epithelial tissue. But remember, when we were learning about epithelial tissue always had a basement membrane in association with that. And that basement membrane was made of connective tissue. So therefore epithelial membranes will contain both epithelial tissue and connective tissue in their structure. However, connective tissue will only be made of connective tissue. It will not contain any epithelial cells in its tissue type. So connective membranes are made up of only connective tissue cells and their matrix. Alright, so this is reiterating some of what I just said there, but epithelial membranes are also known as covering membranes or lining membranes. That is their 2 functions. These contain an epithelial sheet combined with an underlying layer of connective tissue. And remember, that's characteristic of all epithelial tissue, not just those found in these membranes. Also, as we're going through this, these slides, if you are writing notes as you are going along with the video, you might want, before I start talking, I encourage you to pause, write down your notes, and then listen to me dictate. In this particular slide, I'm probably pretty much going by the script on the slides, but from time to time I will add additional material in there. So probably don't want to be writing while I'm talking. It is best served if you write, then also hear what's going on. That's the best way to make this stuff stick there with you. Alright, we've got 3 categories of epithelial membranes. We've got cutaneous membranes, we've got mucous membranes, and serous membranes. The cutaneous membrane is one and the same as the skin. It's also called the integumentary system or integument. We will study this more in detail throughout the rest of the chapter. Most of this chapter is dedicated to the study of the cutaneous membrane. Alright, mucous membranes. The name is misleading. They do not always produce mucus. These line the insides of organs that are exposed to the outside, that have an opening towards the outside. For example, your esophagus. That's the tube that connects your mouth to your stomach. That is going to have the inside portion of it is going to be a mucous membrane. Also, the inside of your stomach, the inside of your intestines, the inside of your urinary tract, these are all going to be mucous membranes. Serous membranes line the outer covering of the organs found throughout the abdominal and pelvic cavity. So, this covers the outside. Mucus will be on the inside surface. So, serous membranes, that side of the organ is not exposed to the outside of the air. Alright, reiterating cutaneous membrane. Again, take a second to write this down before I start talking. So, I've already stated that this is the skin. This is exposed to the air, therefore we refer to it as a dry membrane. And I'm recapping here that most of the rest of this chapter will talk about this in great detail. The skin has two components. The most superficial component is the epidermis. This is made of keratinizing stratified squamous epithelium. Remember, stratified meant it had many layers. Squamous meant the cells were flat. And epithelia was the type of tissue that is designed for covering and protection. Then the deeper layer of the cutaneous membrane, or skin, or integumentary system, is the dermis. This is made of mostly dense connective tissue with some other components in there as well, but the primary component is that dense connective tissue. Once again, refer back to Chapter 3 for more information on these tissues. So, being that the epidermis is made up of keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, what does that tell us about its blood supply? I'm going to do a little Dora the Explorer pause here for a minute, give you a second to answer. Great, you said it was avascular. That means that it had no blood supply. So the epidermis does not have any blood supply. It relies on blood supply from the dermis. The dermis is dense connective tissue and does have a blood supply running through it. And it will pass on some of those materials to the epidermis, and the epidermis will also pass on its waste back to the blood supply of the dermis. Okay, a synonym for the term mucous membrane is mucosa. This is composed of epithelial tissue and loose connective tissue. We specifically call this loose connective tissue membrane associated with it the lamina propria. Okay, remember I have already said this whenever I was giving a quick rundown, but we're going back over it again. Any body cavity that opens to the outside will be lined with a mucous membrane, or mucosa. These are classified based on the fact that they open to an outside position of the body. So not by the fact that they produce mucus, because not all of them do produce mucus. So these are classified due to the fact that they have an opening that extends to the outside of the body, and that's a natural opening, not like a cut. That's like the opening of your mouth, or the opening of your urethra, so on and so forth. These tend to be composed of stratified squamous epithelium or simple columnar epithelium, depending on what they need to do. The stratified squamous epithelium is going to be things like your esophagus that might have a lot of friction, that comes into contact with a lot of surfaces. The simple columnar epithelium would be in places where either absorption or secretion is desired. So these are going to tend to be the places that produce mucus. So mucous membranes are often built for absorption or secretion. Many of these will secrete mucus. The respiratory and digestive areas are examples of mucous membranes that actually secrete mucus. However, those of the urinary tract do not secrete mucus. So you got a problem if you got mucus coming out from the urinary tract. So you might want to go see a doctor. Don't ask me about it. Alright, serous membranes. Moving on, these are also called serosa. These are composed of a single layer of epithelial tissue resting on a thin layer of areolar connective tissue. These membranes line cavities that are closed to the exterior. So this portion of the organ does not have contact with the exterior. Okay, these occur in pairs, the parietal layer and the visceral layer. The parietal layer lines the inside of the body cavity. The visceral layer directly covers the organ.
back over to surround that heart. So now the heart is now covered with 2 layers, and that would sit inside the chest cavity. So now you've got a layer on the inside covering the heart and a layer wrapped around that, and that layer would have some type of fluid, serous fluid. I wish this was yellow, but it's not. So it would be sitting here in our chest cavity, and it would actually help lubricate that heart, stop it from being rubbed on, and it will adequately shield the heart.
And it's actually one and the same. I'll try to add in, splice in a demonstration of that I do with my live class here in a moment. So I'm going to pause right there for that splice. Let me notes. Okay, serous membranes are named based on their location. The peritoneum covers the abdominal cavity and its organs. The pleura surrounds the lungs and the lining of the thoracic cavity there that the lungs are contained in. And the pericardium surrounds the heart and its surrounding area. Okay, these are named serous membranes because they produce a fluid called serous fluid. So we're going to say serous fluid there. This is the term used to label any naturally occurring body fluid in between these membranes. This is usually a transparent pale yellow fluid. It is simply enriched with protein. It is water that's enriched with protein, and is produced by serous glands found in these serous membranes. Alright, so that was all of our types of epithelial membranes. Remember, those were made of epithelial cells and also connective tissue cells. This last, we're moving on now to connective tissue membranes. These are not epithelial membranes. This is their own classification, and we actually only have one type of connective tissue membrane. That is the synovial membrane. This contains no epithelial cells. It is composed of areolar connective tissue. Remember, this is the connective tissue that we learned about in Chapter 3 that would have the cobweb-like appearance that was made up of broad collagen fibers and thin elastic fibers. It was designed to soak up excess fluid. Okay, these are designed to protect joints. This protects bones and muscles at joints. So they provide a smooth surface and a lubricated fluid. These line the fibrous capsule surrounding joints. So for example, in your knee, in your patellar region, in between your femur and your tibia, you have a synovial membrane which holds synovial fluid that cushions those bones and prevents them from hitting into one another when we walk. These are also found in bursae. These are also little sacs that are designed to cushion at joints. And tendon sheaths. These cover the tendons or the ends of muscles as they cross joints so that they can move smoothly across. Alright, and that concludes our brief little lecture here on body membranes. We'll continue with the integumentary system on our next presentation.